help? No? I have to speak a little louder? All right. How are y'all doing?
Great.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming back. This makes fun feel way better. Come see. Hey, honestly, like last week was really amazing, and we talked about it. I know that she went back to her team and was just raving about it, and so I'm just excited for keep kind of diving into this topic. But I just want to do a few announcements. I need to do announcements because I forgot to do that last week. I got in trouble. Okay, so this Sunday is the last day to get early bird pricing for the women's conference. So if you're planning on going to the women's conference or inviting people to come, purchase your ticket by this Sunday, because after this Sunday, the price goes up for students, seniors, regular adults.
Do you know how much more?
I don't know. I would say like $10. I'm just guessing. I really don't look on the website. Yeah.
That is correct.
Oh, it is correct? Oh, yes, the Lord is with me. And next week is bots. For us over the age of 17, which is all of us, Battle of the Schools. So our youth group is hosting an outreach event called Battle of the Schools. They're inviting principals to come and be a part of some competition and fun stuff. And then it's just a time for kids to invite their friends to come to church. So if you're interested, or I don't know if I like promoting that. So I was gonna say, if you're interested and you're not in here, if you want to come back, come back. But they are looking for volunteers, and there's a little card at the check-in booth right outside of this room where you can register to volunteer for that. Or maybe you divide and conquer as parents, and one parent comes in here and the other parent goes and volunteers.
Or you just send me slides because I'll be volunteering with the clerk.
We'll pray about that. Thank you. Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
volunteering too.
I think that's it. I'm going to let Fun go ahead and jump into it, but if you did not get notes, there's 2 sheets. One is the repeat. We made more copies in case you did not bring your notes back, the trifold, and then there's another sheet of notes. She also put some magnets on your table, and so you feel free to grab one of those. She's going to go over that today.
Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, so last week, if you weren't here in the back, if you couldn't hear me, just, give me a thumbs up and I'll keep talking louder. First off, thank you so much for just the amazing response that we got last week. I went back to my team, like Natalie said, and I just kept on raving about how awesome y'all are, and also how I definitely need some backup today. So, okay, this is my teammate. His name is Mike, and he is yes, welcome. Mike is in charge of our STAR program, which last week we introduced ourselves at Demand Disruption. We are an anti-trafficking organization, but we focus specifically on demand reduction. And so one of the programs that Mike leads is the STAR program, and that is a program for arrested buyers. And he pairs them up with defenders, and they walk through this 6 to 9 month program where there's just a lot of healing, rehabilitation, and just walking through a really broken journey into hope, restoration, and healing. And so if you have any questions about that, please ask them to Mike, because I don't know. But please ask Mike about that if you're interested. And also if you just want to know more about what we do. Okay, so for those of you who were not here last week, my name is Fawn, and I am the Church Body Project Coordinator for Demand Disruption. We do strategic partnerships with churches because we recognize that churches are, going through a lot, and also you guys as families and parents, you guys are also parenting right now in a very difficult climate and also a very difficult culture to be able to talk and empower and equip your kids, or even if you don't have kids, younger siblings, or if you're a teacher or a mentor in school, students in that setting. And so that's the reason why get really started, just want to make sure that you all have this. We'll be in the middle sections today. So if you look at your sheet, we'll start off in this middle section right here, and then eventually we'll flip to the middle section in the back. And then keep this around and have a pen ready. Last week I was the fire hydrant, and I just kind of like gave y'all a lot of information and was just very like, you know, just a lot. But this week we're going to be a lot more fun. You're going to get to know the people around you, really good friends, and you're just going to be able to, dive deeper into empathy, emotion, things like that. And so, all right, let's get started. Day 2. Today we're gonna cover how to talk to our family about pornography. And just to recap, we are an anti-trafficking organization, and we use demand reduction strategies. And we do this by eliminating buyer motivation and reducing buyer access to the exploited. So one of the ways we did that, I introduced mine earlier. And so he'll be also kind of floating around here. So if you have any questions or if you need any help with anything, just grab his attention. He'll help you out. So in our work, we ask 2 questions. Why would someone want to buy another person? And then why is it so easy and acceptable to do so? And so this was section 1, just to kind of recap. The reason why an anti-trafficking organization is talking to you about this specifically. First is that no one can argue with me, and we've agreed last week, so any new ones here, you can't argue with me anyway. We live in a hypersexualized culture. Like, this is the reason why everyone is here tonight, is because we want to be able to help and talk to our kids about what does it mean to grow up right now in a hypersexualized culture. So in that hypersexualized culture, it connects to pornography usage, unfortunately, and how that seeps into other aspects of culture, of our day-to-day lives that we may not even realize. So last week we covered apps, we covered billboards, we covered different media material. And so when you have that usage, it equals to demand. And demand, in an aspect that we work with, is a buyer of commercial sex. And then in demand, basic rule economics, it creates supply. And when there's so much demand, the supply has to match and answer to that demand, and it's often fulfilled via trafficking. And so, thank you. Yes, you hear me better. Okay. So, to connect that, the hypersexualized culture to the supply and demand of trafficking, we have this timeline. So if you weren't here last week, this is a great time for you to fill in this timeline that's at the top of your worksheet. We pinpointed these vulnerable ages that contribute to that last age 21, which is the average age of first purchase. And we walked through how, someone doesn't start off there at age 21. There's other culminating effects that have led up to this point, like 18, where this is kind of, normalized in our culture, that it's like a rite of passage for an 18-year-old man to go to the strip club. He's nodding his head and agreeing with me, yes. And then for the vulnerable, this is where most females have had at least 25% have received sex. So this is all contributing to that age 21 that we covered last week. And if we keep on going further back, we reach to age 12, where this is the first smartphone. And this is the same time that US girls were first exploited, going all the way back to age 9, where this is the average age of exposure to pornography. And so it all builds into each other, and in order to disrupt this timeline, we need to be aware of what we can be doing at these significant ages that we've pinpointed. And we're not saying, of course, that you start off at age 9 having exposure to pornography and ending up at age 21 purchasing. Of course not. But we're also saying that this is very relatable to where you are, because
if you and your family are very fortunate to not be somewhere on this timeline right now, someone in your life most likely is on this timeline. And every single person that we have worked with at the point of arrest have cited that they have had or struggled with addiction to pornography. And so this is the reason why it's important that we are all here and we're having these conversations right now. And it just boils down to this quote by Frederick Douglass, that it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And even last week, we talked a little bit about what this culture tells us, what it means to be a man, versus what the ideal and those very stark differences between those two things. And so, last week we did this. We had what culture says. So there were some really awesome answers in here. Thank you so much. It was really awesome just to see how reflected you guys were as a group. So culture says player, moneymaker, powerful. Someone in here said problem. Another person in here cited that it's a part of the culture that they grew up, and that kind of plays into that. And our participants, I feel, is respectful, honest, hardworking. We heard God-loving, God-fearing man multiple times. And so we have to sit and think about, why is there such a difference? Why is there such a difference between the cultures, what culture says, and what's the participant's ideal? And so, just citing, we have a couple of different timelines that we like to share. And this one actually might be even just a little bit closer to where you might be sitting in the church right now, because at age 18, this is where, it's not on here, but foster girls are aging out of the foster care system. And because they're such a vulnerable group, we found that this is also the legal age for girls to enter into the porn industry. And so as an organization, we realized that this was an issue, and we were so honored to be a part of the movement at the Texas State Capitol to pass legislation. So now that of course, this is a small victory, but now the legal age has been risen to 21. And then going on to age 21 of this timeline, we've looked into different studies, and no longer money is the most noted reason for divorce. It's actually pornography usage is now the cause for 56% of divorces. And so we have to ask why, and we have to ask, what is it really doing to us? There are 40 different consequences that in our research that we have compiled of an addiction to pornography and what it's all doing to us as adults. And then now also we have to be thinking about, what is it also doing to our kids, where their brains are still developing. So physical consequences, I'll just kind of tackle a couple, where you have changes to their brain, sexual response, and addiction. The second one right here, pornography induced erectile dysfunction. In another presentation, we had a urology resident told us that one of the first things that he asks of young men that come into the clinic with this issue, they have to ask, how many hours of porn do you use in a week? And that's directly correlated to their treatment plan. And so if we can't say that this is not having an effect on us, that this isn't bad for us, then we're really mistaken altogether. And so that's one for physical consequences. There's a couple others. Physical injury to self, loss of time and productivity. For psychological consequences, you might see increased aggression and violence, brain fog, shame and guilt, hyper-focus on sexual stimulation, low self-esteem, low body image, depression, social anxiety. Also important to note that this is not just a male issue anymore. in our research and our studies, we've also been noticing that now there's an upward trend of girls that also, unfortunately, are addicted to pornography as well. And so we have to think about what kind of effect is that having on our young girls as well. Social consequences. You have loss of trust with others, inability to be intimate in relationships. We talked about the divorce earlier, increased infidelity in correlation to divorce, loss of belief in marriage, objectification of people, and then spiritual consequences. And we're in a church setting, of course, but for those that might not walk with God, might not have the faith, there's still an element of pain and shame and a disconnection to a higher power. And so this is something that we also have to be aware of that's happening in our church, because we do not know what the person next to us is struggling with. And this is so important that we can also be empowered and prepared to have the conversations with the people in our church. And so we're going to be watching this video. Sorry. Okay. I forget it when it automatically plays. We're going to be watching this video, and it's just going to be going over the brain science of what pornography does for our brains. And it does mention evolution there, and so I hope that doesn't discredit the video, but the brain science part of it, I think is just very, very credible, and it just gives us a great visual about what's really going on. And so, please watch.
Sexual tastes vary from person to person, but with the current pornography epidemic, as some call it, one has to wonder how exactly this may affect our desires and perception of sexuality. Moreover, how does it affect our sex lives? Pornography constitutes about 25% of all search engine requests and is the fourth most common reason people give for going on the internet. And while it may seem to simply facilitate an instinctual sexual response linked to millions of years of evolution, the truth is, pornography has dynamically changed over time, ultimately molding our tastes and desires. The not-so-shocking truth is that pornography has profound consequences for the brain and acts in many ways like a drug. With prolonged exposure, your tolerance is increased, and many often find themselves addicted. Though it's not a physical substance, it leads to the same general loss of control, the compulsiveness to seek out the activity despite negative consequences, and withdraw when it goes away, much like that of gambling or running, for example. The issue is that continued exposure can cause long-term or even lifelong neuroplastic change in the brain. Dopamine is released as a reward whenever we accomplish something, whether it be eating to sustain life or sexual activity to produce future life. And this dopamine consolidates neural connections in order to drive us to perform the same activity in the future. In other words, it alters and forms the brain cells to motivate certain actions. It rewires your brain. The National Institutes of Health measure drug addictiveness by testing rats. The rat is trained to press a button in order to get a drug, and the harder it works indicates how addictive the substance is. It turns out that the more addictive a drug is, the more dopamine we see released. And while there is unfortunately no rat porn that we can give to them, we do know that dopamine is also released during sexual excitement, which pornography plays right into. The more time you spend doing it, the more dopamine gets released, which reinforces the behavior and makes you not only desire it in the future, but require it. And as you begin to imagine these images away from the computer or while having sex, they become reinforced. Furthermore, each orgasm releases even more dopamine, which consolidates the connections made during the session. It's a feedback loop that becomes harder to escape. And just like a drug, your tolerance for visual stimulation has now compounded, making it more difficult to be turned on by reality. Pornography addiction can often lead to finding your mate less attractive. The good news is, it doesn't have to be permanent. Usually when people understand the mechanism and realize it's affecting their relationships, they can stop. The brain is often described as a use it or lose it system because the neural connections you stimulate grow stronger and desire to be activated, while the ones you ignore become weakened. Much like your muscles, which, if sitting still all day, itch for activity, but after prolonged non-use, they become complacent. Luckily, because of this use it or lose it brain, the same neuroplastic system that proliferates these habits can also be used to acquire healthier ones. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
Okay, so Who here's maybe like watched that video before? Okay, of course. I would be worried if you didn't. Okay. And so, yeah, just to kind of summarize, it does have that same effect on the brain, equal to drugs, to gambling. But also, I also note too that on the positive side, it's also running and more positive behaviors, right? And so we'll dive deeper into that, how we can supplement the those negative reactions to maybe positive behaviors. And so this is the question I've been waiting to ask this group specifically. Who here got the talk from their parents? Come on. Okay. Okay, thank you so much for answering that. So a good number of us in here didn't, and I also am one of those that didn't, because it was a part of my culture and my family and how we function. We didn't talk about this at all, and even if we did talk about it, the way that some of you that raised your hands, maybe the way that you received it wasn't exactly the best either. I'm gonna ask you, what would you say your talk was? Was it good? Like, did you think it was like a conducive, experience, or was it like I could have done without?
Well, whenever I was in kindergarten, my parents didn't give me the talk then, but when I was in kindergarten, my parents asked me if I knew what sex was. And then in 5th grade, some students told me what it was. And so I went back to my parents and I told them, what they had said. So I don't really remember that talk, but the talk that I do remember that was helpful was the night before I got married, my mom had the talk with me about what was going on. So it was helpful.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think there was a couple of things. I think there was a couple of things that you shared just now that kind of struck out to me. First, I thought that was interesting that your parents kind of introduced the topic around kindergarten age. I think the fact that there was multiple attempts is awesome, because we have to have multiple conversations about this. It's not a one-time conversation. I'm not quite sure if waiting till the day before, not to pick on your story, not quite sure waiting until the day before your kids get married would be a good opportunity. So, the talk, right? Why it usually doesn't work the way that we think the talk means. First, it's often a monologue, right? For those of you that did raise your hand, most likely was your parents talking to you and not with you about this. And disagree, those of you who raised your hand. Okay. It's also because it's often rooted in fear and concern. There wasn't understanding and empathy. And that understanding and empathy and honesty part matters so much to the kids these days. And so it's important that we approach it from that perspective. The talk isn't ongoing. It's just that one and done. It has to be ongoing. It has to be continuous, because it's different from house to house. It's also different from age level to age level. And so we need to be considering that as we continue to have those conversations. And that's the reason why this next part is so important, is because kids have much more sexual content available to them than even me and you guys have seen, when we were their age. These days, I think a child that has access to a smartphone is consuming a month's worth of information in one day, like 30 or 40 years ago. And so we need to be thinking about, what are we going up against? And we covered some of that last week. And also we covered the consequences, that porn's addictive nature, it involves many factors. It just doesn't quite look like how media shows it, where it's like closed off in a room. It can show itself in many different ways. that we might not think that this is something that's going on, and that's the reason why we need to be looking out for these signs and these symptoms. And so it's also important for those of you who have older kids. How many of you have like high school and adult kids? Okay, that's good, because I think most of you came back from last week. When they're starting to think about having significant others or dating, we also need to be having conversations with them about this so that they can have this conversation with their significant others about establishing boundaries. Like, that's so important and very difficult for kids to be able to do this in a confident way. And then communicating values in the relationship. Like, what are you and I, what are we about, right? And then connecting it back to that 12 to 15 age range that we shared with you, where this is when most students have seen pornography, and this is also the same time where the largest intersection of human trafficking survivors have entered into the life of human trafficking is between the ages of 15 and 17 years old. And so we need to think about these vulnerabilities as we continue to empower our kids, young and older, about the talk and what it means. And so it's safeguarding. It's safeguarding and renewing this mindset, shifting from the talk of like, Sean, sit down at this table. We're going to talk to you about, the birds and the bees. That doesn't work anymore. We have to have, shaping conversations, not shaming. This isn't I caught you in an act kind of thing. This is we're going to come together and we're going to work through this. It's about coaching. I just, said this. It's not catching. It's about sharing, not shouting. More often than not, the younger generation these days, they're wanting to hear more about the struggles that you have as parents to them, and that way you can connect on this deeper level. It's about having boundaries, not barriers. The moment that you tell, especially like a teenage kid, right? The moment you tell them no, they're most likely going to do the exact opposite. But we have to tell them why. And then, to end, it's what culture will normalize versus what is really normal and what are the lies specifically to your household. And so we are we're going to go into our trees. We're going to go into our trees, and all of you guys have a magnet. You guys have a magnet. Okay. Yes. Please let Mike know if you all don't have a magnet. Everyone has a magnet? Okay, cool. All right, awesome. So, when we think about, what is pornography, we can't quite answer it as it's an internet video anymore. There's so many other aspects of media culture that's seeping into it, and it's not about the form per se, it's about function. It's about what it's doing. And so it's important that we're having these conversations too and framing it in a way that this is affecting you, this is affecting your brain and how it's working, it's affecting your health. And so when we're having these conversations, we have to remember the trees. And so that's the reason why we bought this magnet for you guys. This is our gift. Put this somewhere you guys can remember and see as a family. And this is how we are able to have these conversations and grow together as, families. So that's symbolic with the tree. So for T, it's trust. R, it's realize. E is empathize. Another E, edify. And then S is shame-free. So I also gave you the answers just now to your foldable. And so if you haven't filled out trees on your foldable, this is a great time to do that. Okay, as you're filling it out, I just want to pause here and just take a breath. Ooh. I did give you guys a lot of information just now, and I just wanted to see if you guys have any questions before we dive deeper into trees. Questions? Comments? Okay, wow. Okay, all right. Oh, come on.
I found it really interesting, the study on the brain. One of our men's groups actually recently went through a similar study, and there was doctors that have actually done brain scans on people who are addicted to cocaine and compared their brain scans to people who are addicted to pornography. They were identical. They're identical. And so it's just crazy the physical effects that it has on a body when you're caught in that cycle.
Thank you. Yeah, so for those of you who might not have heard, there was this video, a documentary.
It was a Bible study.
It was a Bible study. Awesome. Okay. It's a Bible study that the results of it showed that the effects that cocaine had on the brain was similar, or if not the same, to the effects of pornography addiction on the brain. And so, thank you for sharing that. I will definitely cite you from now on in my future presentations. Yeah, so it's important that we have those conversations and we are able to do it in a way that really shows trust, because trust equals resiliency. And we all probably have heard this before. It takes years to build trust, but just a glance to lose it. And we need to remember who you're talking to, because for the smaller kids, it's different. And then for the middle school and high school kids, it's different. And especially that teenage age range, as someone who's worked with at-risk youth before in the past, everything matters to them. The way that they trust you and they bring this issue to you, your facial expression, the posture, your voice, your tone, any slight thing that could trigger something where they might think that what they're presenting to you is shameful, or if it's inflicting guilt on them, immediately they will withdraw. So just, we have to be mindful of that whenever your kids might be coming to you, or your students or your siblings might be coming to you with this issue. How are you reacting right now? Because your first reaction most likely will be fear, not knowing what to do. But hopefully after this workshop, that might not be the case. And so we need to think about the parenting style that you use with your children. When they're younger, you have to be their caregiver. You're providing for your child's needs. Some of you here, if you didn't have a spouse at home or someone in your family to help out, your kids will not have food to eat. This is kind of that stage of life. When you go into a little bit older, you have to be their commander. You're a benevolent dictator for your child. You're helping them to know, you should not jump off the table. After that, you become their coach. You're moving away from total direction to self-direction. And then as they get a little older, you become their counselor. You're helping them make the right choices. And then, ending with consultant, where they've reached all of these stages, and now they've been empowered, and they, both of you agree that you feel like they know enough where they're leading, and you're providing support when asked or invited. And so it's not about which one's the right parenting style. It's about where you are right now in your own home with your child and what they need. And so some of you might not ever get to consultant, and that's okay. Some of you might be at, coach, but you have a 5 or 6 year old because they're very independent. And that's okay too. It's about just recognizing where you are right now. Because the second half of these parenting styles, you have the why line. And so, if you ever have told a teen to do something, Sarah, go take out the trash. Why? If you're a teacher, Stuart, go bring me this book, or do your homework. They go, why, right? And it's because, they're learning. They're trusting you to want to know the reason why they have to do that. And sometimes with our busy lives, we don't take the time to tell them why, and then expect them to do this, not knowing. And now, with just the advent of technology and how fast-paced life is and how fast-paced our kids are growing up, they're gonna want to know why to be able to do the things that we want to create for them to have that safe environment. And so, to really be heard, you have to first begin with why. And so when you have that moment with them where you tell them, what they're supposed to be doing, you start with that why first. And so we'll do something like very basic, and then we'll go into, this issue. So for instance, if you have a child that's in sports, right? You start off with, hey, you want to get better at soccer or tennis or whatever it is you're playing, right? Well, then we need to practice. You need to practice so that you can get better and you can reach your goal. Well, how? How can you do that together? Well, you know what? I need to exercise too. We're going to do this together as a family, and we're going to go to the park after I'm done with work, and we'll do this together. And then say what you do. We'll be out here for an hour, and we'll do this, once a week. I'll help you out. I'll keep you accountable. So you and I together, you can reach your goals in, soccer or tennis, and I can get some more exercise. So that's something you can use just with anything. It's just starting with that why. It's so important. And then for something like this issue, we'll be talking about, the shared responsibility next week. But, hey, when we go to sleep at night, we're going to put our phones in the hallway because I love you, and because you and I both need to get sleep. And when you have your phone in your bedroom, it's distracting you, and you know what? When I have my phone in the bedroom, it's going to be distracting for me too, and both you and I need to sleep. So we're going to put our phones out in the hallway, and we're going to do this because we agreed in our contract, we agreed in our family contract that we are doing this together. And we're going to do that every single night before we go to bed, before we say goodnight to each other. You and I are going to check up on each other and make sure that both of our phones are in this basket in the hallway. So it's really just kind of as simple as that, and it might seem kind of simple, but it really is if you just start somewhere. It doesn't have to be like going home and be like, hey, are you watching pornography? Or what are your friends talking to you? It can be just as simple as something that you're struggling with your child and talking to them at home right now. It could be taking out the trash. It could be doing more chores. It could be driving their siblings to school, whatever it is. The more you practice, the more it sounds natural, and as they get older and into the coach, the consultant parenting style, it just becomes natural to start the conversation like that. And so, we need to realize the situation. We talked, and thank you so much for sharing, about how pornography addiction has a similar effect on the brain as drugs, as cocaine, and how in the graphic, it's just this never-ending cycle where it's going to be difficult to break it because it's just continuous, because it's just that addictive. And so we need to be having these mental health and also just all around health conversations as well. And we need to realize what the situation looks like, because for some of us, with your children or even with those that you're walking with life right now, it might be this track right here where it's just very light, it's lightly marked, and it's very easy to just wash it away. But for some, it might be the middle picture where it's a lot more difficult to be able to smoothen that out again. And for some, unfortunately, because we live in a hypersexualized culture, it's not about shaming, but just things happen. And it might be this last image right here, and they're just so deep, and you just don't know how to get them out. And we also need to realize that when they're stuck, or when you as a family are stuck and you need help, you may lose things in the process of getting free. And whatever it is, we have to be okay with that. Friends, certain people, relationships, maybe even neighborhoods, schools. We have to think about what really needs to be done, because it's important that when this problem comes to light, that it's addressed. And so we reach empathize, where empathy, it's about being there and seeing eye to eye with your kids and what's really going on and listening to them. And empathy, it validates. Sympathy, it isolates. And so, anyone in here heard of Renee Brown? Yes. Thank you, Renee Brown fans up in here. Renee Brown, if you don't know about her, she's an awesome researcher, also local, where she just does a lot of research on shame and what that looks like and how to work through that. And she's really just an awesome expert on empathy. And even in my work with, in a previous job with teen trafficking survivors, a lot of her research rings true for teens these days just struggling with things. And so, please watch.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So empathy, just to summarize, it's just respecting the dignity of others. And what does that mean? Because sometimes it's difficult, I feel like, as adults, to be able to empathize with the issues or the problems of someone that's younger. And even like myself, having 10 plus years of experience working with at-risk youth, I still fall into that trap of saying at least. Like, at least you didn't have to deal with dialogue. You know, like, at least, you know, like, yeah. So, we have to be mindful of that whenever we have the opportunity to share our story. And so these are just important things to remember when sharing your story. First, the whole world does not need to know. It can be very private. It can be just you and whoever is involved. Or if you do choose, bring in just one or two very trusted people into the conversation. Not everyone needs to know the whole story, and it should be age appropriate and consider your relationship. It's a two-way street, but you are the person who's leading. So we call our people defenders, so all of you are defenders. But yeah, it's important that you are leading this. And then it's applicable, right? Integrate your faith into the story. We don't know how this can play into like the shame and guilt aspect. So just think about how appropriate or how conducive it could be to integrate faith into the story. And then set up yourself for success. Choose a time that works well for both you and your child. I'm not a morning person, and so ideally this is not a good time to have really difficult conversations with me. I'm a 2 p.m. kind of gal, funny enough. Yeah, so yes. So for you, like whatever that time that works best for both you and also for your child. Don't talk to them right after band practice, right? Don't talk to them right after sports practice. Make it an experience that is unique and special for you guys. Go get boba if that's what you're into. Get a snack. Go for a walk. It's not a meeting. It's not like, hey, like come sit down at the family dinner table, because ultimately what's going to happen is they're never going to want to eat dinner again if they have to associate the conversation with the family dinner table. I just want to pause here because I saw a hand up. Did you?
I wanted to see the slide before this.
Okay, yes. And you're more than welcome to take pictures on your phone if you'd like of any of these slides.
Thank you.
What's up?
I'm confused because, so this is us sharing, this is us taking that time to speak with our child or whatever, so I'm not sure what it means the whole world doesn't need to know, or not everyone needs to know the whole story. Obviously when you're speaking to your child, there's certain things you're not, especially in the bypass, and I'm not gonna blow them away with everything that's happened in my life.
Amen.
But there does need
Or maybe it refers to us telling maybe other family members or something.
yeah, I do think it's extremely important to have somebody that knows everything. And that may be one or two people out of 100 good friends. But in my
That's right.
experience, it's in my experience, I feel like there's got to be someone that can go to war with you and knows your dirty laundry. I don't know.
Yeah, of course. And I think we wrote it in a way where we're trying to encompass all situations. And so just to kind of like lay that framework of, you get to pick and choose like who you involve into this conversation. I think it's just important to make sure that these are very trusted individuals, and also that it's age appropriate. And so, like if you have like elementary school kids, might not talk about what you did as a teenager, right? But, as they get older, sometimes that realness, like when they become a teen, sometimes that realness of like, this is what I also went through in the past really helps out. And like some of the kids that I worked with, like some of the roughest kids you'll meet, they appreciate that. They appreciate that you're not just this perfect mom or dad or teacher or coach, that you also have struggled with things, and that I think speaks volumes, especially with vulnerability tying into that. Any other questions? Okay. So just to kind of pick up where we left off, make sure that your child's mindset is in the right place, and make sure that you are prepared for what you might hear, because what you might hear might be very, very terrifying. It might be very, very just scary. And so it's important as I mentioned earlier, that you prepare yourself, that your tone is right, that your expression is right, that your posture is even right. And then remember the identity language. We're trying to build positive identity language to counteract all of the identity language that culture is trying to throw at the kids. And so, you know, on your tables, there's this sheet. So this is essentially what the empathy story model is about. And so the very top is about empathy, vulnerability, and motivation. And you can personalize this. So you write down empathy, like what in broad strokes is your attempt at empathy with your child where they are. And so if your fifth graders having struggles with their teacher and them are not getting along, maybe your empathy is like, hey, like when I was in school, the teachers might not have the teachers didn't quite like me either. I understand that, So that's your empathy, your vulnerability. But you know what? Even though the teachers didn't like me, there were still other teachers in the school that really helped me out. Or, I found one best friend that was just really there for me and listened to all the things I had to say to them. And then motivation. Motivation is how do we move forward, right? What do you think you can do to improve your relationship with your teacher? Motivation. So all of that goes into your story, and when you have your story, you're breaking shame, you're challenging the status quo, and you're reclaiming truth. I'm not a bad child, right? Like, I'm not a bad student. Like, it's just a difference of personalities. So this is a part of breaking shame, challenging status quo, reclaiming truth, and it just draws people out of darkness towards seeking help. And so, if you haven't already copied that, please go ahead and take a picture because I kind of want to move us along. It's 8:03. Okay. We good? We have this? You have this down? Make sure you find the one person at your table that writes really fast and, ask them too after this. Okay. So, when we have the empathy story model, this is an example of what it looks like, kind of compressed and put together. So empathy. I know this is hard, and I'm just glad you trusted me with this. And while it's not exactly the same, I know what it's like to struggle with shame. Vulnerability. I've had a battle with shame, and I used eating to cope. After a while, it made me feel even less in control, and the escape was very brief. Then it just added more shame. Motivation. But with help over time, I've gotten so much better at dealing with the source of the shame and have faith that by us working together, you can too. So this is an example of using an eating habit to be able to connect as a struggle in a conversation. Because you might not also have the same struggle as your kids, but this is a way that it's vulnerable and it's real and it's inviting and opening a door for them to be able to have that conversation with you. And so at your tables right now, let's do this. Let's practice this. Think about just something that you can use right now in application with your child at home. Like, what is something that they're struggling with? It might not have to be this, of course, but what is something that they're struggling with? Friendships in schools, or, having fights with their siblings, whatever it looks like. Try to practice this, and the more you practice it, the more real and the more just vulnerable and more open you can be with one another. And so I'm going to give us about, let's say, 7 minutes. How late can I stay? How late can we be here? 8:20. Okay, let's do 7 minutes.
Or 10 o'clock, you still be here till 10.
Okay. And if you need any help, Mike and I are going to go around and we'll try to give you guys some pointers. But you guys got this. You guys got this.
Come on, it's making me crazy. I got 17, 14. I think I was telling you today, I wish you would take kids. That's like in the high school. Like, they don't even know about it, but they're doing
Good? This was hard, isn't it?
it's hard.
You get a lot of jokes.
It's a thick compliment. And there's so many different parts of it. What do you think? about any of them. Because he said we're building up this level and they start to recognize on their own. But when they see something that they don't understand, if they're willing to come talk to you and life about it, that is leaps and bounds above and beyond like the things that can happen. Because where else are they going to go? The internet or their friends? You're going to get the bad answers.
Okay, as much as I would love to stay here to 10 with all of you very lovely people, I think we need to come back now. So, you guys, if you could just kind of wrap up your conversation, finalize and finish the last 1 or 2 sentences of your story, I'll try to wrap this up with a very nice neat bow so that we can get out of here on time.
I wish I had the answer to that. I'm still dealing with the fallout of not being married now. And I'm still dealing with not being as active and influenced in their life. I like my friends and definitely like that. So I'm trying to slowly bring it back.
So that's the thing, is how do I bring them without breaking the net, right? How do I, that's the thing.
There you go,
Okay, everyone, let's come together. Let's come together so we can wrap up this class for the night. I was going around and was able just to hear some really awesome conversations happening around the room. I'm just so glad to hear and see this feedback from everyone. And so I'm curious, I can't take more than 2 people, but I'm curious to see first either just maybe what your conversations were at your table, or if you were just really like, I got this, and you have like a story ready to share if you'd like to share. I'd love to hear just a little bit about kind of what everyone was at. And so on this side, I'll do 1 table for each side. So this side, I'm gonna ask this table, what's up?
Oh, they're quiet now.
I know. What happened?
You want to know what our discussion was about?
That, or if you have a story, if one of you at your table has a story to share, I'd love to hear it.
Hey, story. Just a story is fine.
Well, once upon a time.
Well, I just kind of shared my not doing that, apparently, with my daughter and being bullied at school. And I was bullied at school for the same thing. And my reaction to her, apparently, is not empathetic, but more like, oh yeah, I've gone through that too, but this is what I did. And her response to me was, but I'm not you. And I had a hard time with like, what do you mean you're not like me? You got a smart mouth here at home. You know? So like when she said that to me, and my response was that, so then it went nowhere. It went nowhere. So, but Pastor Debbie set me right on the right trail. So I know now where I need to go next time.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's so crazy that I feel like this seems very simple, and just like the visualization of it seems really simple and straightforward. But even like in my professional life, working in the realm that I work in, we don't realize how natural the reaction is. This is what I did, and this is what you should do too. Instead, it should be this empathetic approach where it's like, hey, like I hear you. I hear that you're going through this. And just that simple thing makes a huge, huge difference. Okay, over here, I'm gonna pick on Pastor Natalie's table.
Go on, Eddie.
No, we just talked about our kids in general. With one playing sports who's my son, right? And sometimes he just doesn't like to practice. How we can empathize with him. thought about the vulnerability part of things as well, you know, and just talking about that and the outcomes of that. If you do put in the hard work, you get a full scholarship to a college where you go overseas and play basketball or baseball, right? Because he's in baseball. So it was the motivation factor of not only that, but when you're in a team sport, you're not taking, you know, yes, you're gonna make lifelong friends, but you're learning so much more. You're learning how to be a team player, right? You're learning how to trust people, and that's gonna take those qualities prepare you for life outside of your sports.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and so I think it's important to note too that this doesn't have to touch just this issue. It could be anything, and it also could be with anyone. It could be a coworker that's struggling. It could be, you know, your sister or your friend or your brother. And so this is just a really good, useful tool to have just to connect with people. Okay, so let's wrap a bow on this. Edification, it builds up what was torn down. And so your responses should communicate this. And also, coming from a culture that doesn't say I love you very often, I want to encourage you in that. And that, you know, sometimes our kids don't hear this enough. So sometimes just starting a conversation, it just sets the tone so well. Like, I love you, and this is the reason why we're having this conversation. A couple of other ones. I'm grateful for you. I'm here for you. God isn't mad at you. Porn is addictive. You have the power to choose a different path, and I'll help you with that. And so, shame-free. The second part of having that conversation is having it in a shame-free way, because there's a difference. There's a difference between guilt and shame, because guilt is just this reaction to what happened, to what was done. So guilt is I did this bad thing. But shame will manifest and it will tell you or whoever's struggling that I am this bad thing. Guilt, it focuses on how your negative actions have affected others. But shame, it focuses on others thinking negatively of me and who I am. There's feelings of remorse and regret for guilt. But for shame, it's feelings of worthlessness. For guilt, it's generally wanting to change and heal. For shame, it's, I do this behavior because I can't change it and I don't deserve healing. Guilt, it requires forgiveness of others, while shame, it requires forgiveness of self. In guilt, you're taking accountability, but shame, you're giving excuses and giving up. And so it's important that we have a distinction between the two, and when we communicate, we help them to identify really what it is that they are reacting to. They are reacting with guilt, and shame will manifest if we're not careful, and we have to have that positive identity language where we can take away that shame aspect of whatever it is that they want to talk to you about, or whatever it is that you need to talk to them about. And so, just kind of in wrapping up, this is Therese. So please put this magnet somewhere where it'd be a good reminder for you guys. And even like if you have, if your kids, you feel like you're ready to have that conversation with them, kind of just walk them through what Therese is. Like, hey, this is something I learned at this workshop today. This is how, I want to kind of start conversations at home. Trust, realize, empathy, edify, and shame-free. Okay, so this is the review for section 2. So if you want to go ahead and take a picture of that. I have no time for Q&A. I'm so sorry. But I will have my card available. So if you'd like to send me an email if you have any questions about this, or if you'd like to send an electronic copy of this slide, I'm more than happy to send it to you. But just for next steps, just make sure you have your trees magnet, you write and practice your story, and also please follow us on social media and follow us on our website. We have just information and resources and just things for tools of awareness that you can use for these conversations. So again, thank you everyone for coming. Please come back next week. Our director will be here, and he's just a treasure trove of knowledge and just quite the personality. And I've had to hold him back from not coming because he's like, he'll just take over the whole presentation. He's like, I want to come. I want to see these people. So he's excited to join us next week.